What's going on, everybody? JHow here, and I wanted to bring you a bit of juicy Diablo news, which popped up last night on DiabloFans.com, which is where I actually get pretty much all of my updates for Diablo. I tend to hit there first. Either way, the patch notes, or at least the Datamined patch notes for 2.4.1, not 2.5, but it's going to be the next patch that's coming up. This was datamined and released last night. Now, in red text that you can see on the screen there, the following information is datamined and may be inaccurate. That's true, but a lot of this actually does translate over to the PTR. And I wanted to cover a lot of the changes that are coming up because it's actually really cool, some of the things that we're going to be seeing. So we're going to start with the good stuff because this is where most everybody wants to know what's going to be important next season, what's going to be important next patch, and that generally revolves around set bonuses. Now, we see the numbers in place, and there's actually some pretty huge changes from me browsing through here. But at the same time, you have to understand that after the last PTR that we saw a lot of changes throughout, especially to the damage modifiers for the set bonuses. But we are looking at a lot of different stuff. And again, I want to cover a post from the actual Blizzard forums that covers a few other things that came from a blue post there. But Shenlong's, the damage is going to go up from 100 to 150%. It's basically a natural progression. I think every season, every patch, we're going to see these numbers gradually go up. That way, Greater Rift levels will continue to increase, because without that, nobody sees any real progress. Next up, Natalia's Vengeance. After casting Rain of Vengeance, you did do up to 400% damage. Now it's going to be 500%, or deal 500% more damage, as well as take less damage. That's kind of the main thing. You can do more damage, but if you can't survive at higher Greater Rifts, then it's going to be tough. And then also reduce damage for 10 seconds, up from 6 seconds, so you don't have to necessarily spam it as much to be able to have greater survivability. Another cool one, Immortal King's Call, and we've actually seen this worked into a couple of builds, basically a hybrid, because you've got the belt and the weapon to allow you to do a few different things. But the 6-piece bonus says you're going to deal 400% more damage as opposed to 250% more damage. Now, this is something that we saw in earlier PTRs dating back a few patches ago that got nerfed pretty hard. So they've got data from then, and they have current data as well, and plenty of it. So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Tal Raj's elements, it's reworded a little differently, but the damage is going up an additional 250%. So a lot of really cool stuff with Tal Raj's. Now here's one that's really interesting. Zunamasa's. Now, currently in patch 2.4 in Season 5, the top Greater Rift build tends to be around a Legacy of Nightmares set that's a no-set build, and it basically makes Zunamasa's look terrible. Now, 4P says you're going to take 3% less damage for every fetish you have alive, up from 2%. Again, the natural progression to be able to take more damage. The 6-piece bonus. Now, this is something that actually, we saw a huge jump up. I believe it was 200% originally, and then it got bumped up to 800%, which seemed like that would be enough, but it wasn't anywhere close. Now, initially, and again, this still could easily be tuned or even be wrong the minute the PTR goes live, but this does give us a good idea. 1,500% increased damage, up from 800%. And it allows it for 8 seconds as opposed to 4. So there's a lot of really cool stuff there. The Shadow's Mantle, this is one that was rather underwhelming. We saw this showcased. There was a lot of stuff that came out on the last PTR that looked really cool, and then they changed a whole bunch and it wasn't that good. So they're basically doubling that. So 600% up to 1,200%. That's pretty huge. Next thing, Might of the Earth. Now, this is going to say up from doubling the duration. So this is now 150%. So allowing that, the effect Leap gains the effect of Iron Impact Rune, and the rune's effect and duration are increased by 150%. So that's really cool because that allows you to get in there, because when you use Might of the Earth and you're using Leap, you're generally right in the middle of all of that damage. So it's good to be warded off there. Next, the 6-piece bonus, another huge jump here. Again, there's going to be a lot of this stuff. I wouldn't, it's one of those things that they did last PTR that they hadn't necessarily done the same way in the past, is that they tuned it up really high and then gradually tuned it down throughout the PTR. Now, they did say that they're not necessarily making as many changes as they had in the last couple patches, and that's cool, but they still have a lot of numbers to work with, and that's what really makes this fun, because there's going to be even more diversity as they continue to balance and then buff up some of the weaker sets. Thorns of the Invokers, we're going to see each time you hit an enemy with one of those attacks, It's going to be increased by 35%, up from 25% for 2 seconds. That's really cool. This is an interesting thing for the 4-piece. You take less damage for 20 seconds after damaging an enemy with bombardment, reworded from casting it. So you can't just cast it and nothing and then get the damage reduction going, and you have to hit an enemy there. The other thing is the attack speed and of Punish and Slash are increased by 50% and deal 800%, up from 600% of your Thorn's damage to the first enemy hit. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out here. Legacy of Raycor. This is a huge one, right? 6-piece bonus, and this, again, falls into the hybrid build that's currently in place. This is a huge jump, up from 300% to 750%. This is huge. Whether that will play into a solely dedicated Raycor build as opposed to some of the hybrid builds we've been seeing, we're going to find out once that PTR hits, which I'll be bringing you videos as well as streaming this over on Twitch. So if you guys want to check me out, I will be doing that the minute the PTR goes live, as well as other times. Either way, Veers, this is going to be a fun one. And there's a lot of items that are getting reworded or kind of redone, and that's the next part. There's more than just the sets that are being changed, but up from 1% up to 1.5%. Now, Monkey Kings, this is another one. Everything seems to be getting buffed. Now, again, a lot of this will be tuned down once some of the builds come out on the PTR, but you have to start somewhere. Monkey King's Garb is basically going from 500% to 1,000%. Huge. 6-piece bonus. It's going to, the Wave of Light, Lashing Tail Kick, Tempest Rush, consume a stack of Sweeping Winds to deal 3,000% damage, up from 1,500%. So this is huge. Embodiment of the Marauder. So the Marauder set, Sentries deal 400%. We've seen really good things out of the Marauder set this season. Whether we're going to continue to see that type of success, that's going to be, one of those things that we'll find out. The 6-piece bonus. They're naturally tuning this up to, again, climb those greater rifts as we see the 800% damage up from 600% for the 6-piece. Just straight buffs there. No reworking. The Marauder's in a really good place. Now, here's the one that I talked about with Riker, because Firebirds was super strong on the PTR, and then it got nerfed to the ground, and then it all just disappeared. Nobody likes Firebirds, right? 6-piece bonus, your damage is increased by 40%, up from 25% for each enemy that is ignited. Now again, this is what was hugely reworked on the last PTR. Elites that are ignited increase your damage by 2,000%, up from 250%. You can only have one elite damage bonus active at a time, so that's actually not too bad. Raiment of 1,000 Storms, this is another monk one. It says that this is actually new. It says your spirit generators increase the weapon damage of Dashing Strike to 12,500% for 6 seconds, and Dashing Strike increases the damage of your spirit generators by 300% for 6 seconds. So a lot of really cool stuff. Helltooth getting buffed up by 6% after applying, or that's the damage reduction, for up to 60%, same as we saw earlier, from 50 to 60% for the Rain of Vengeance. After casting Wall of Death, the damage 1,400% up from 900% to be able to apply that type of damage. Roland's getting a buff from 600 to 750% for Shield Bash and Sweep Attack. Maybe we'll see kind of those old Roland's builds coming back, so a lot of cool stuff there. Wrath of the Waste, a lot of people are kind of bummed that the Whirlwind build wasn't that strong, and there's actually some really cool stuff that we're going to see for Whirlwind. During Whirlwind, you gain 50% damage reduction, and your Wrens deal triple damage. That's actually really cool. So there's some really fun stuff I think that we're going to see coming out from a lot of the Whirlwind builds. The Magnum Opus, the DMO, this is the one that took Season 5 by storm. 2.4 has been littered with different DMO builds, and rightfully so. It's really cool for the amount of builds that are coming out here. After casting Arcane Orb, all of these skills, it reduces the cooldown of slow time by 2 seconds. Added new spells, Explosive Blast, Spectral Blade, and Wave of Force. So it adds a few more spells to be able to, maximize the potential of the DMO there. The other thing, reworked from being inside of a slow time. You take 50% damage or reduced damage while you have a slow time active. You no longer have to be standing inside of it. Allies inside your slow time gain half the benefit. So you just have to have it active. You don't have to constantly fight within it. That's one of the things that we saw different builds have to go around. You would have to spec into something that would further your cooldown reduction, and then therefore, depending on the build, it limited the amount of builds that you could have, so that if you were on a slow cast rate, it was really hard to get that next slow time bubble up, and then you'd have to move from one to the other. So, there was a lot of really weird quirks with that, but they actually worked out. And then added new spells to the 6-piece bonus as well. So, again, falling right into that, allowing the diversity of the DMO build going forward. Unhallowed Essence, this is huge. This one actually went up from 15 to 20% last patch. And it was okay, but it's in the very low 80s in terms of how well it's doing for most general Unhallowed Essence builds. It's going up from 20 to 40% for every point of discipline you have. So it's one of those things that you need to make sure that when you're gearing, or if you're saving this gear for next patch, you need to make sure that you have discipline on items like your weapons, your offhand on your quiver, and your chest piece there, as opposed to any other stat. Uliana's Stratagem, and this is up from doing its total damage. We're going to end as we scroll down here. The 7-sided strike deals double its total damage with each hit, up from doing its total damage. That's really cool. And then the 6-piece increase the damage of your exploding palm by 250%, and your 7-sided strike detonates exploding palm. So that's going to be a really fun one going forward. And then the spirit, this is the spider one, right? So, or the chicken one that we've been seeing. So Hex gains the effect of the tone of hugeness rune after summoning, yada yada, so on and so forth. 10% of your max life per second for 15 seconds. That's up from 10 seconds. So a little bit of help there. And then the 6-piece bonus, the damage of your creature skills is increased by 1,500%, up from 1,200%. So whether that's going to play into anything, I don't know, but there is going to be new stuff. But let's get to some of the other things. That pretty much wraps up the set pieces there, and that's kind of the main thing. Now, for some of the other stuff, new pet and wing icons. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be involved here. A lot of different things that we're going to see. And it says the third pet icon is called the Cow King. That one is right there. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming up there. The pet strings are all there. If you guys want to check out this post, I'm going to leave a link to it in the description, so you can check that out. I don't want to go through all the pet ones, else we'll be talking all day. All right, next up is the class changes, and they already said that they're not going to be doing as many class changes, none of the overhauls that we've seen over the last few patches, and rightfully so. They're in a good place right now moving forward with 4 different sets. Let's make the sets work. Let's make everything else work around it. They just introduced a ton of new items, so there's a lot for them to change as opposed to add. The Barbarian increasing armor on the tough as nails, increases thorns by 100%, up from 50%. That's just going to allow a little bit of natural damage to come out there to help the Barbarian out. Hammer the Ancients. Now, this is a huge one. Critical hits heal you for 3% of your max life, reworked from dropping health globes. And that's a direct approach, and they actually address this in a post that they're trying to get away from all of these globe builds, these weird support builds that are basically neutralizing the amount of builds that are, the diversity at the 4-person or 3-person level to always require one of these barbarians that's dropping health globes. Every season we've seen something that's always been required, whether it's been a witch doctor with the mask to fear everybody, or a monk that's supposed to be doing different things. This is one of those things to where they're basically neutralizing a lot of what the barbarian does. Ignore Pain has been reworked a little bit. Companion has been reworked a bit as well. It says the boar increases you and your party's life regeneration by 10,728 and resistance to all elements, reworded from damage types by 20%. So a little bit of rework and the addition there. Grasp of the Dead for the Witch Doctor, Death is Life. Enemies who die while in the area of Grasp of the Dead have a 70% chance to summon a zombie dog. So we might be seeing a zombie dog build coming out here, and remove the chance to drop health globe. So, that'll actually be really interesting to see how that works. Maybe we'll see a zombie dog build, maybe we won't. The Wizard Archon, and this is going to be one of those things. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some really cool Archon builds coming out. While in Archon form, your normal abilities go on. Your damage is increased by 300%, up from 20%. And your armor and resistances are increased by 150%, up from 20%. Now, I imagine we'll see a lot of tuning there with those numbers. Each enemy killed while in Archon form increases your damage by 6% for the remaining duration of Archon. So, Improved Archon, increase the damage of Archon abilities by 50%, up from 22%. There's more of the natural progression there. Teleport. You can now, instead of doing a 3-second, it's now a 2-second. Archon form can cast Teleport with a 2-second cooldown. That's actually, pretty vital when you're going through there. Now, there's a lot of attribute stuff and a lot of things to go through here. The red is stuff that's taken out. The green is stuff that's either been buffed or changed, normally for the good, right? Now, there's a lot of strings in here, and there's a lot of information, and there's a lot of different things that we're going to see. Now, this isn't something that I want to get into because this is actually pretty in-depth when you start talking about the amount of strings that are changed and then trying to break down what it all means. When the patch notes actually come out, we'll be able to get a much better grasp and a little bit cleaner format to tell us what all is going to happen with these. Again, if you want to check these out, the link is in the description. Here you can see just different strings that are updated, tooltips, errors, what they call gizmos, item flavor. It's just a lot of different stuff that's in here, and there's a lot of really good stuff, and I love these data mines because it really gives you an idea and gets you hyped for the PTR, and the PTR, of course, is the test stuff and get you hyped for the next season or next patch, depending on how you play. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. Now, I want to get into a couple things as we get towards the end here, because you can see there's a lot of things that are being changed. The rings, it only tells you the passive items, stuff like that. So there's some really cool stuff in here. There's going to be some buffs. There's going to be some reworks to a lot of different things. You can check all this out because you can probably figure out what a lot of this is. Like Elemental Arrow gains an effect based on the rune. Ball Lightning now travels. This, is got to be different things, and it's listed as a ring, and a lot of this stuff, again, isn't necessarily exactly how it looks, and that's why I said when it gets to the string parts, sometimes it's best just to wait for things to come out. Items, you can see a lot of different transmog stuff. Yeah, there's just some really cool things. Cosmetics, you can get through that. The list is long, but I wanted to get there. Set dungeons are being addressed. I think this is going to make them a lot less frustrating for certain classes. You can go through, see all the different changes there. You can definitely see that a lot of them are going to be easier. Now, this is the blue post I wanted to talk about because Wyatt Chang, who is one of the lead developers, right, he put up a post, and I actually saw this on Twitter, which linked me to his post on the Battle.net forums, and it was about the Taeguk. And, there's a lot of things. The Taeguk is kind of the bane of a lot of classes' existences. Long time ago, and maybe not too long ago, it almost used to be required, and the playstyle with it is pretty rough. And nobody really likes shooting into thin air as a demon hunter or anything like that just to keep a buff up, right? It wasn't that much fun. So let's take a look at the post that's here. And it said, first, we've been looking at the prevalence of barbarians in group play beyond Greater Rift 80 and how they're being used. Basically, that globe build that we've seen and a lot of the other skills that are being used. As a result, they're reducing the party benefit of Ignore Pain Mob Rule because that was huge, 50% down to 25% because that was a 100% necessary thing, as well as the globe drop. So there's a lot of things that they're adjusting for group play to allow for more diversity at the top because you basically had to have a barbarian in your group if you wanted to do anything at the high level, and it just really limited the amount of diversity. Not everybody wants to play a barbarian, and not everybody feels that you have to have a barbarian in order to perform well. I'm sure there's going to be something that comes up in the next patch, but it won't be the barbarian. Now, the Taeguk, right? You can actually check it out. So on the link here, if you actually scroll to the bottom, you can actually click and go to that post as well. He addresses the Taeguk, and it really is going to be changed, as well as some other things that they're talking about as well. Taeguk will now only work for channeled powers. That's actually really cool. Taeguk will now stack more quickly, but also drop off more quickly. The maximum is now 10 stacks, not just all this crazy stuff, and you'll now lose the stack after 1.5 seconds instead of 3 seconds. Again, some of this might be changed. The armor percent component of Taeguk has been changed to 2% per stack. So you can see here the idea is that Taeguk will complement those moments, and this is one of the things that Wyatt Chang actually addressed, is that it was kind of their intention to do a lot of this. It just seemed not to work out the way it wanted to. So there's some changes coming to Taeguk there. You don't have to worry about always having that in certain builds, because I know that's always frustrating. And then you take a look, finally we're changing both the Twisted Sword and the Selenium. Now, the Twisted Sword is one of those things that a lot of people were going, and they're having to cast out all these energy twisters, and it was crazy because it's not something that was a fun playstyle. So now it's getting capped at 5, right? So instead of spamming it over and over and over while the group spams Health Globe generation. I mean, it's just not exactly the funnest thing to build around 2 characters and stuff like that. The Selenium is getting an internal cooldown of 8 seconds. That's the one where you get the globe. So they're changing a lot and addressing a lot towards group play, and rightfully so. We're going to see a lot of different diversity, I think, going in. Again, a lot of these numbers may be changed. The biggest thing, obviously, is the set items, and then, of course, some of the item reworks that we're going to see naturally there, which was mostly in the strings that we don't want to get too in-depth of that. Again, that's a lot of stuff that we'll see once the PTR patch notes come out. Now, there hasn't been an official word about when the PTRs come out. Obviously, they normally need at least about a month of test time, and if you look at the fact that mid-January was when Season 5 came out, and mid-April is when it's going to end, then you can basically look at a natural progression there to say, hey, the PTR should be coming out fairly soon. So I encourage you guys to go check this out. If you want to wait for the official patch notes for the PTR, don't blame you. Even then, those are going to be changed. But for those of you that are waiting for that next juicy tidbit of Diablo information, it is right here on DiabloFans.com, where I saw this last night. I got the tweet about it. I follow them on Twitter. I get that. So if you guys want to check out all this stuff, they do a nightly post, which is cool, and they post some really good stuff there. So that's it. That is it for this bit of information. So hopefully you guys are checking this out. If not, I will be bringing an update as well. The minute the patch notes actually hit, I'll do another video to kind of keep you guys in the loop. And then, of course, once the PTR goes live again, I will be streaming over on Twitch, as well as keeping up with information on YouTube as always. That's my #1 source where I do everything. So you guys enjoy the notes, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again very soon, the minute the PTR actually comes out. As always, happy hunting. See you again. I wanted to cover a lot of the changes that are coming up because it's actually really cool, some of the things that we're going to be seeing. Kitty, what the f*** are you doing?